chickens, welcome to this Q&A video. It's been a long time since I did a Q&A on my channel, but I do have a playlist of them down below. If you are into this kind of more casual content that you can just maybe zone out to or do something while you listen or whatever, then go down below. There's a whole playlist of wonderment. Some of it is very much on topic and some of it is very much off topic. Today's Q&A is going to be a collection. It's going to be a mishmash of different things that people have asked me on Instagram when I last asked for questions. Don't mind my lockdown updo, by the way. I must say that I do look a little bit like Carmen Miranda and Lily Allen had a baby in the basement of Eclair's Accessories. Today, I've only just realised that that is how I would probably sum up this look, but I'm fine with it if you're fine with it, so let's get going. Do you have any tips to make the most of therapy? That is a really good question. I would say that it's good to have goals in mind before you actually begin your process with a therapist. So an idea of what you want out of the work, your aims, if you will. I think there should be some flexibility around them, but basically it's good to know, isn't it, what you want out of something. And I think what you want out of something can be realistic, but it can also be ambitious and exciting and something that you can imagine will be game-changing for you. If you possibly can, I think it's also good to go into every therapy session with a strong idea of where you want to begin, because usually, obviously, it will be left open, the floor will be left open for you to decide what you want to bring to the table, what's been concerning you, and, you know, it's useful to go in kind of feeling into what has been the thing that you want to talk about, or what is the most pressing thing, what is the thing that you think the session could be most well used for. I also think it's important to figure out for yourself over the course of a number of sessions how useful your therapist is to you and how much of a good fit you are. So do they refer back to things that you've said? Do they keep you accountable to things you've agreed upon that you will do in your time between sessions? And do you feel like there are breakthroughs being made? And this isn't about making, you know, a judgment overall of the capabilities of that therapist. I think it's just making a judgment of that particular connection, making a judgment of that particular process and deciding, is this actually worth the investment that I'm making, whether it's just time and focus or whether it's also money on top of that. If you've been placed with a therapist and you don't necessarily have the option of switching without getting back onto another, you know, massive waiting queue, then don't be afraid to speak to your therapist, level with them about what you feel would be good for you in the sessions and what isn't working so much. And if you don't feel that there's accountability, or you don't feel that things aren't being readdressed in later sessions and you would like them to be, then maybe talk about that and kind of get that on the table. Talk about how improvements could be made for you. Whenever I've had therapy at any point in my life, I've always allowed myself to take notes during sessions. I know that's not right for everybody. That's not something that is possible for everybody and feels good for everybody, but I do like to take a few notes. I also like to have some time afterwards where I just sit and I journal and I think about what came up and process what came up. And I think that's my number one tip, is making sure that you've got that little bit of free time either right after the session or at some point where you can at least jot down a few bullet points of the main things that you took away or the main things that you agreed with the therapist that you would consider and think on. I'm trying to expand my wardrobe and jewellery and finally power dress, but I often feel like it's an excuse to be frivolous with money and spending, even when I secondhand shop. How do you balance it? The main way that I balance it in my sort of mind and in my life is in understanding what a particular piece would bring to the equation in terms of what I've already got, what I already have, right? First of all, I have an awareness. I have a very sober, very realistic awareness of the fact that I have a lot of clothes, and I do like to collect vintage pieces and secondhand pieces and random little items, and I'm aware of that. So already I'm making a bigger allowance for myself in the department of clothing and accessories than I would do for maybe other things. So I think first of all, it's okay to level with yourself about the fact that you are a magpie for clothes. You do like to shop for interesting secondhand pieces. You do therefore want to put some space aside for those clothes to be stored, and you do want to also alleviate yourself of the guilt that may be associated, or the confusion or worry that may be associated with your interest in collecting clothes. The second thing is to be specific about what you are what you're purchasing. So be curating essentially as consciously as you can a collection of clothing. For example, you might know, for instance, that you are really sucked in by a vibrant dress shirt. You know, that is the thing for you. You may have a number of them already in your collection, and you may sort of give yourself that space and that allowance to collect more because it's just something that's a particular passion for you with clothing. For me, there is really no limit when it comes to jewelry. If I see something interesting, if I see something different, if I see something that takes my fancy and my magpie eye goes towards it, I let myself have it. And you know, this is why I don't go shopping every week. Of course, I do have some parameters around around how often I allow myself to be around clothes and accessories, obviously. But when I am around them and I see something that I love, I don't let the idea that I might have another thing similar hold me back. I let myself collect jewelry. I just love to collect it. I want a big fat Iris Apfel style collection of jewelry by the time I'm a little old lady. But with clothing, I'm a lot more specific. There's a lot of things that I don't allow myself to buy because I already have a plethora of them. I don't allow myself, for instance, to buy jumpers or sweaters anymore. I've got enough of them now and they always speak to me, and it's just going to get more and more ridiculous. I think I should value the items that I own in that area. And there's a few other, you know, sort of very distinct areas of clothing, like dresses as well. I wouldn't be getting any more dresses for at least the next few years because it's about valuing what I've already got and knowing that I don't circulate the pieces that I do have, and I could get a lot more value and a lot more enjoyment and wear out of the things I do have. So essentially what I'm trying to say is have some categories where you are banned, you're restricting yourself. Have some categories where it's got to be something uber, super duper rare. And then have categories where you just let that be your, you know, your sort of your wild category where you're like, oh yeah, you know what, if it's a fancy schmancy shirt, or it's a really beautiful brooch, a vintage brooch, or it's whatever, the thing it is that I collect and the thing that I'm all about, I'm just going to let myself have it. I think the number one rule when it comes to buying anything with your expendable income, your disposable income, is to know that you are buying it with your disposable income, that the income that you have is excess income with which you can buy whatever it is you're buying, whether it's books, whether it's clothes, whether it's computer games, whatever it happens to be. So I do think that there has to be an honest discussion that everybody has with themselves. And if they're feeling like worried about balance, for example, then the first question they may need to ask themselves is not, do I have the space for this? Or is this really necessary? But in fact, is the income I'm using to even consider making this purchase genuinely disposable? Or are there things that need to be paid first with this money? It's not really as disposable as maybe I want to tell myself that it is. How do you stay inspired during the pandemic? I'm feeling super lame and uninspired. I'm trying to embrace it, but it's hard. Yeah, I hear you. I think some days are harder than others. I think that some days have been a struggle and a challenge, and other days I have just sort of sought out new information, or really strive to make something and put something into the world that I can be proud of or happy with. And sometimes it's just about making myself up and feeling good that way. So it's different things. I do think that for me, any kind of sort of really somber monastic vibe around this would not be something that would be helpful for me for too long. You know, whatever happens, whatever's going on in life, whether it's lockdown or not, there's still got to be somewhat of a party atmosphere that I insist on from time to time. Let it never be said that I will not fight for my right to party, because I will. I'll fight for it. I did make a video about, you know, just sort of getting through living in a global pandemic. And in that video, I did talk about, you know, being uninspired, feeling challenged by the situation, and the importance of not telling yourself that this is the moment in the history of your life where you should be writing your, you know, best-selling novel, or, you know, painting your first brilliant canvas. I just think shitty time for it, you know, and I think that toxic productivity agenda can really convince us, and has convinced a lot of us during the time of lockdown, that we had to be producing something of merit and value, otherwise we weren't using our time correctly. And if we did have time in lockdown to reflect and to be away from work or whatever the case might have been, then we might feel a lot of guilt about what we did or did not do with that time. And I think we can afford to unburden ourselves from that. I don't think that that is necessary, and I don't think it's helpful. What are your top 10 movies of all time? You know what? I can't do a top 10 in that way. I'd have to really sit down and have a long ass conversation with myself that could go on indefinitely. I would have a very Virgo moon response to that task, because it would be a task of sitting there and actually figuring out my top 10 movies of all time. So I'm just going to name 10 movies as they come to me that I love and that I've watched over and over again. Here we go. The Science of Sleep, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Synecdoche, New York, The Thin Red Line, Fight Club, The Wizard of Oz, Velvet Goldmine, Party Monster, Fargo, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Amazing movies. I love your tattoos. Which 2 tarot cards represent fire and salt for you? That's interesting. So I've got tattoos on my fingers that represent fire and salt, the alchemical symbols for each. Okay, so which 2 tarot cards represent fire and salt? For me right now, just off the top of my head, just really linking into what I think and what's coming through for me, I would say that the Magician is the card that I would associate with salt in terms of my reasoning for having this tattoo. Thinking of the circle of salt as the protective circle that forms the basis of sacred space, in which, you know, we can do our magical workings. And the idea that salt forms a powerful barrier that locks stuff in and keeps stuff out. So I think of it as a magical tool in a lot of ways. So I'd go with the Magician for salt. Bit of a, like, maybe a random connection for some people, but that's how I'm feeling right now. And with fire, let's go for the sun. Let's go for the big orb of fire in the sky, the sun. Is it possible to see a tour of your jewellery collection? I'm in love with your fashion. Oh, that's sweet of you. There is actually a very, very old video where I take you through a tour of my spiritual jewellery, as it was at the time. I don't think that I'm going to be taking you guys through a jewellery collection video because it would just go on for an entire weekend. I have so much stuff. But I'm definitely going to make a video about style as it pertains to my witchhood, and the idea of power dressing and the idea of enclosed cognition in magic and in psychology. I'm definitely going to do a video on that where I talk through some pieces that I love, and I just talk about why getting dressed is so important to me. So I'll definitely feature some of my favourite pieces of jewellery in that video for sure. I got Netflix during lockdown and I'm overwhelmed with choice. Any recommendations? I got Netflix during lockdown as well. I never had it before. The very first thing that I started watching as soon as I got Netflix, I couldn't wait, I was so excited, was Hip Hop Evolution. There are 4 seasons of this incredible documentary series about the very, very birth, the inception of hip hop. Samples were made from like disco tracks and the little house parties that were happening, and just the very first names in the game, and then onward from there, and how it developed in different cities with its own styles and branches of it coming out everywhere, and what, you know, who the main players were in every part of the scene. And that was a joy and such a pleasure, and I'll rewatch it. It was stunning. Definitely recommend that. I've been wanting to watch something like that for so long, probably since I was about 19 or 20 years old. I've really been wanting to be taken on the journey, and I was taken on the journey. It fully delivered and more, and I'll definitely rewatch the whole thing. Obviously watch Rick and Morty, and obviously watch BoJack Horseman. I would definitely strongly suggest both of those things. And I also really like Big Mouth as far as cartoons go, guys. I know that it's not for everybody, but I really like it. I did watch Tiger King. I had to watch it. There were too many memes that I didn't understand, there was one too many memes. I could handle all the Carol Baskin shit. It wasn't that did me in. It was this meme that I saw on my timeline, and it was you know, one of those ones that says I don't believe in the perfect t-shirt or, you know, whatever drink, and then it trails off and then it shows you what the perfect one of them is. Well, it said I don't believe in the perfect credit card, and then it trailed off, and it was a credit card with Joe Exotic on it that says I'm never going to financially recover from this. And that just did it for me. I was like, right, that's it. I don't care. I'm gonna be literally the last person on the Tiger King gravy train. I have to know what that's all about. Yeah, I can totally understand why it gripped so many people. What else have I watched? I'm having a little look through my watch history. I watched Lil Peep, Everybody's Everything. That documentary broke my fucking heart, and it's very, very, very beautifully made. That really just got me somewhere very deep, and it sort of didn't surprise me going into it when I realised from the opening credits that Terrence Malick was involved, and Terrence Malick is one of the most important and ridiculously paradigm shifting, emotion bending, brain like absorbing, immersive filmmakers of all goddamn time. And so I was expecting the Terrence Malick treatment of this documentary, and it really came through. That documentary is a really moving tribute, and it made me think a lot about so much. So I really appreciated it. Can I just bitch about something though that I started watching on Netflix that I thought was going to be really, really good? Rotten. I really expected Rotten to be so great. You know, the documentary about food and like food corruption and unhealthy food and scandals with food and stuff. Totally thought it was going to be amazing, but they just went in with this very hard sort of really pro-capitalist perspective that was only about America's interests, America's financial interests in relation to food, and how those interests were being fed or being sort of jeopardized. And I was just like, oh, this is just some bullshit. I thought this was going to be about really looking at corruption and really looking at what needs to change and really looking at, you know, planetary resources and changing the way we think about food and how we obtain food and stuff. It was none of that. It was just only about America's bottom line, basically, and that's the lens through which every episode that I watched, which was 4 episodes in total, was made through. And then I was just like, oh, you know what? I thought this was going to be so good, but it's just shit. Somebody's asking here on Instagram what ab workouts I do because my abs are lit. Thank you very much. I usually, when I'm at the gym, spend quite a bit of time on the ab crunching machine, the weighted machine that helps you specifically with your abdominals. And I also do a lot of cross trainer and a lot of running. And then when I'm on the mat, my favorite things to do are sideways plank thread the needle, which is a very vicious version of plank. Like if you like to try and hold a 2-minute plank, if you're about that life, then I would definitely suggest trying a sideways plank thread the needle. It is death and life all at once. You get used to it, but I wasn't used to it at first. Stomach crunches, obviously, they're really good. Mountain climbers, I tend to find, are really good. What is a typical daily meal plan for you? Okay, so first of all, if I'm not hungry for breakfast, I just won't eat breakfast. And it really does vary. It depends on how late I ate the night before and other variables like how hot it is. You know, I get hungry less when it's really hot, and in the winter I get hungrier. I might be hungrier depending upon where I am in my cycle, my menstrual cycle. So I don't wake up and immediately have breakfast, but if I do, it's going to be fruit. It's going to be bananas and oranges and things like that. Apples, Granny Smiths, love Granny Smiths. Then for snacks, I like naked bars, I like nuts and seeds, I like handfuls of raisins, nuts and seeds all together, things like that just to keep me going through the day. And then for lunch, I really like to have a large salad. If I'm going to have a lunch, it's going to be some sort of a large salad. And then for dinner, I really like to have pasta dishes, I really like stir fries, I really like wraps. And you can see a lot of the different things that I make for myself and also a lot of the different things that I drink with the hashtag that I use on Instagram, Maddox Vegan Eats. Maddox Vegan Eats is a hashtag that will show you everything that I've put on my Instagram account that's got anything to do with vegan food and drinks that I have made, that I have prepared for myself and consumed. So if you really want to get into what I like to make and what the ingredients are for what I make and what it looks like and stuff, go to Instagram and check out the hashtag Maddox Vegan Eats. Do you work much with the triple goddess concept, incorporating or intertwining the maiden, mother and crone energies? If so, how do you connect with the wisdom in each? It's not a paradigm that I'm particularly interested in. It's not a concept that particularly grips me, and it never really did grip me. And I suppose one of the main reasons that it didn't really grip me is because I've known since I was a teenager that I didn't want to have children, and I still don't. So even though now the word mother conjures up so much more for me than just childbearing. At the time when I was a teenager and I was just getting into these concepts and I learned about maiden, mother and crone, I probably instantly found it a bit alienating and a bit like, ugh, that's not what I want for my life. That's not the trajectory that I want my life to take. And I very much thought of the mother archetype as being very much connected to the process of childbirth and child rearing. And so obviously that just wasn't for me. I often say that I skipped straight to crone, to be honest. But I do think in the past when I said that, it was because of a fundamental misunderstanding that I had about some of the nuances of the maiden archetype. Like now, for example, I think of Joan of Arc, who I work with quite closely. The energy of Joan of Arc is very close to me. There's a portrait of Joan of Arc on my altar at home. I'm very invested in the story of Joan of Arc and just her spirit, if you will, her essence. And I think of her as being very much indicative of the maiden archetype. And, it was kind of coming to this realization as I got a bit older that, Artemis is the maiden archetype. And so I think I had this idea of the maiden as being like this sort of this not very worldly, sort of virginal, horrible moralistic hangover ideas of purity, not really known much of the world yet or whatever. And people really corrected me on that as I went through. People really started to say to me, like, your idea of what the maiden is a bunch of crap for a kickoff. And that was very helpful to me. So I think I've reassessed my connection with all three of those archetypes now, but in terms of putting them into the triad and working with them like that, or really feeling like they have much value to me in that way, it's never been for me, maiden, mother, crone, not really. And I totally am not saying it shouldn't be for anyone else. I think that I don't like this idea, I don't like this thing that I see people doing where because an archetypal structure doesn't work for them, or they feel that it doesn't include them, then they feel like anybody who uses it is excluding them as human beings. And that's not it. Archetypes can be very medicinal. They can be very healing depending on what your life journey has been and depending on who you are as a person and what you have to resolve and that kind of thing, the struggles you might have with your identity. So I don't think of maiden, mother, crone as being something that excludes me or that other people shouldn't work with. I think that if it's something that helps you and if it's something that makes sense to you, go for it. But for me, it didn't really. What's your favorite workout music? When I'm in the gym, I pretty much only work out to drum and bass. I have a drum and bass playlist on Spotify. If you would like to know what I consider to be beautiful drum and bass, you can go to that Spotify playlist. I will leave it for you down below. It's called Drum on My Face, and it is my life's work. It is my magnum opus. It is the thing that I'm proudest of that I've ever made, ever in the world. I'm joking, but this playlist is a big deal, guys, all right? It's a big deal amongst me and my friends. So yeah, I've been carefully curating and collecting together so much D&B that I love over the course of time, and I'll probably just stick Drum on My Face on, or one of the playlists made by one of my friends, because so many of my friends have made amazing, beautiful drum and bass playlists as well. And at home, when I'm doing mat workouts, I found that I like to be a lot more chill. In fact, the only thing really that I've worked out to since I've been in Amsterdam is sort of like emo trap and sort of like goth trap type stuff. So I have this joke that sometimes I like to do No Pain No Gain with Ghostmane and then have Toasty with Posty. And that's basically where I do my workout to Ghostmane and then I eat toast listening to Post Malone. I don't know, it just seems to be this soothing, satisfying combination that I've found that works for me. So in case you want to go ahead and also live your best life, No Pain No Gain with Ghostmane and then Toasty with Posty, trust me, it's beautiful. It's all about that combo. And I have a playlist of sort of like beautiful sort of cloud trap, emo trap type stuff. I'll also leave the playlist for that down below that I've been working out to a lot with my mat workouts that are much slower and they're much more about sort of holding tension in the body as opposed to working up a really big sweat. So actually I prefer that slower pace and the sort of the very introspective and beautiful lyrics that are provided by sort of like cloud trap and emo trap rap type, you know, that whole sitch. So I've made a playlist of tracks that I enjoy from that genre, also on Spotify. I'll leave that for you down below as well. Would you like to move to the Netherlands? If yes, why? I would move specifically to Amsterdam. I think Amsterdam is an incredible city. It's just got great energy. I actually really have come to love the sound of Dutch as a language, and have been slowly picking up bits of it and learning it. And I would like to be fluent. I don't know. I just went from not liking the sound of it at all to thinking, God, this is absolutely divine. I want to be able to speak this. I want to understand every last bit of it. And my friend has been playing me like tons of sort of golden era Dutch hip hop, Dutch rap, and it's a very beautiful language for the rap genre. It makes sense. There's something harsh and abrupt about the sentence structures and the way they end. It's very, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I love certain aspects of the nightlife in Amsterdam. I love De Mar Cantina. It's one of my favourite nightclubs of all time. It's amazing. I love going to School. I've been to School and I want to go again. That was a good time. I saw Joy Orbison at School, which was amazing. I love Cheeky Monday, the drum and bass night that happens on a Monday at Melkweg. Just really do have a good time here when things are open and we're allowed to gather, which we're currently not. So sad, so sad. I'm not going to move to Amsterdam though, not for the moment anyway. I think things are very up in the air with what's going on with Brexit and how the dust is going to settle with that. And also I live right by the sea in the UK and it is beautiful. The colours, the warm sea at this time of year, the sunsets, the uninterrupted sunsets right out to sea. Beautiful, beautiful. I do miss it. I do miss it. But Amsterdam is being very, very good to me. How are you continuing to connect with Hel, Mother Mary and the lovely Joan while you're away from home and your permanent altar? Did you take any key bits and bobs with you to Amsterdam? Thank you for all your wonderful videos, Kellyanne. Thank you. I didn't bring any imagery specifically pertaining to any of the big three, Joan, Hel or the Mother Mary. I did bring with me an image that I have been working with that I felt was really appropriate for how I was feeling when I left for Amsterdam and the kinds of things that I knew I was going to be approaching in terms of themes for my inner work while I was in Amsterdam, and I'll show it to you. Oh, I just had to go and grab it off my temporary altar. Okay, so here it is. It is a piece of artwork called Untitled 2013 by Yule Crayer. Is how I think you pronounce it, and it is this woman with this serpent, this snake around her head, partially obscuring her face. And to me, that just spoke to me so much for a bunch of reasons I won't go into. But I thought if I have to put anything central, it's going to be that. And then I also brought my Oracle of Echoes tarot and my Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, so I knew I'd have plenty of imagery to work with from that as well. It has been difficult being away from like my Mother Mary Oracle cards, my beautiful image of Joan of Arc, my statuettes of Hel and my image of Hel, just having their sort of like the altar set up. I mean, I do miss my altar, there's no doubt about it. I do miss it. I miss seeing it all lit up like a Christmas tree with the candles going and the fairy lights and just sitting in front of it and making spooky shit happen. I do miss that a lot, but I do not need those things to carry the essences and the energies of those incredible forces in my heart and in my mind. They are always with me. They are always present. They have been at times very, very close, and I didn't need imagery to spark that connection. That connection is there. How did you start connecting with your spiritual side, and how were you able to hone in and start mastering your craft? So first of all, I was very connected to my spiritual side as a child, and that's, you know, something that I think a lot of people would say is that there was just this organic desire to make spells and potions and put different things together and put my hands over them and put my energy into them and stuff. I was witching from a very young age without knowing what I was doing precisely, and I was also very, very interested in witches as well, and constantly doing impressions of witches and wearing those Halloween witchy fingers. And I was obsessed with witches, the White Witch from Narnia, the witch from The Wizard of Oz, all of that. Coming back to it was more for survival, so I kind of fell away from it at a certain point in my teens. And then in my late teens, when I was really suffering with a rage addiction and I was self-harming and I was really struggling, I came back to it through meditation. I had a conversation with my Uncle Seth actually about meditation that was very significant to me, where he talked about the benefits of it. My Uncle Seth is not with us anymore, but that conversation is one that I can say profoundly changed the course of my life. So that there's something very even more special for me about that conversation now. So when I came back, it was not on the basis that I was going to dive back into the witchy stuff that I'd been into when I was a teenager and when I was even younger. It was very much on the basis of like, okay, I'm fucked up, I need something. Meditation sounds like it's going to be a thing. I also read an article around a similar sort of time. I think this is how I ended up talking to my Uncle Seth about meditation, was I read an article about men in maximum security prison for violent crime who took on a course of meditation, and they were studied, their behaviours were studied, their moods, etc. And massive changes were seen. And that also really, really interested me. So I came back to it from a point of survival, and then sort of slowly started to regather this sense of like, oh wow, yeah, I've always been a witch. I've always had these instincts and these inclinations. And so meditation kind of opened the door for me to get back into the other stuff again. For me, honing my craft was always about knowing I want to make a craft that is unique to me. I want it to involve things that have been very significant on my timeline. I do not want to pick and take and choose and appropriate from things that are not necessarily a part of me or my life, because I don't feel that's authentic. I think everything has to come from this place of being a constructed living tradition that only my psyche could have invented in the whole of the space-time continuum. And so even though you will see things in my witchy practice that are very similar to what other witches do, and you'll also see things that are outlandish compared to what you commonly see other witches do. So it's a mishmash. I'm by no means saying that I have the most unique and authentic practice ever. I still, for instance, recognize the Sabbats, and I still work with the moon, and you know, all that sort of basic witch business. But for me, honing my craft and really letting it be powerful was about letting it be something that is to do with me. It is to do with me, and it's to do with the objects that are important to me, my memories, you know, my places of power and potency. And it was about not having any burden of proof upon me to try and explain to somebody else or justify to somebody else why it might be that my practice is set up in a certain way. It's just set up that way, and it's for me. It's not for anyone else. It's for me. And so I had to be that. I had to go in that very self-oriented direction and cut away everything that wasn't working. And I mean everything, even if it felt sacrilegious, like not always making sacred space before I did spellcraft, for example, because in my view, my bedroom is my sacred space, and it always feels exceptionally high vibe, and nothing in there is ever feeling uncool to me. So, you know, that things like that, where I was just like, why is this the dogma? Let me throw this out. Let me think about how I want to approach energy raising, or how I want to approach working with deity or whatever. So everything had to be very individualized, and I had to give myself that permission. In the beginning, it can be hard to give yourself that permission, but once you start seeing the results from that, you really just think to yourself, okay, you know what, I'm throwing the rule book out of the window. I'm really going to start adding elements that call to me, that I've never seen anyone else add, and I'm going to keep these things but throw these things out, because these things have meaning, and these things I don't so much connect with. Once you see the incredible evidence that that is working and it's making you more potent as a practitioner, then you feel less worried about it, and it becomes less something that is sacrilegious and more something that is absolutely your birthright as a witch. I have a question about assessing spiritual teachers. Some folks I very much respect work with a teacher who gives me bad vibes, but I see the benefits there would be to working with them. I've never been the type to follow a teacher, so I wonder if I'm just being rebellious or if my intuition is well founded. Any thoughts you have about assessing this kind of dynamic would be super helpful. First of all, you know, it could be that a lot of the people in your life who follow specific teachers are definitely doing so with their critical thought in mind. So they are maybe taking certain things that are useful or do resonate, and they're leaving other things by the roadside. And I do that as well. I definitely feel like there are some teachers that say certain things and I think, nah, you know what, you can keep that bit. But then there are other things that they talk about or other themes that they come around to, and I really like the way they speak on those things. And it's the same with political commentators or writers, or, you know, cultural pundits, anything like that. Another thing is, you know what, you absolutely have the right to just feel that there's not some great vibes around a specific teacher for you, and therefore you do not want to be involved with their teachings or whatever. But I think unless a friend of yours is really falling under a completely captive spell of a teacher that seems like they could be having a cult-like energy to the audience that they're gathering around them, or any of the situations that they have going on, I don't think you need to worry. I think people learn from different people, and it's okay to disagree. You say, I wonder if I'm just being rebellious or if my intuition is well-founded. Well, you know what? I think that your intuition is keeping you away. So, you know, that's a good thing to just tune into. And just because a teacher isn't right for you and you intuitively know that they won't be a good fit for you, obviously, again, doesn't mean they're not a good fit for somebody else. So I think it's about not losing sleep when it comes to the resources other people may be using. But yeah, if your intuition is telling you, I'm not quite sure about this person's message or the way they're coming across, I think that's fine. And I think that there's a difference between judgment and discernment. I think that I can discern that somebody isn't for me without judging that they shouldn't be for anybody. And I'm sure you feel like you can put yourself in that same position. Also, as an aside, I'm going to leave down below a video that I made about spiritual predators and about different types of spiritual teacher that may be unscrupulous, or different situations that might occur with spiritual teachers that are problematic. So that might be useful for some of you if this question has been of interest. There's quite a few people asking about my relationship with my matron deity Hel, what I do regularly when it comes to her, how I feel about her, that kind of thing. I'm going to leave a few links below. One is specifically about my journey with Hel. One is about how I connect with Goddess. There might be a third one. I can't think. I can't think what I've got in the arsenal that could also be of use. Any tips for asking efficient questions of the tarot? I get so stumped on what kind of questions to ask and if I need to use an actual spread or just intuitively draw cards. You know what? It's about finding what's right for you and rocking it from your own perspective. I do sometimes work with a thing that I call a sacred patchwork, which is this meditative device where I just lay out cards from different decks and I take myself on a journey, and I do provide that for clients as well. I'll leave it down below for you, the link to that purchase option. So it's not that I can't read like that, and I do enjoy reading like that sometimes. But I think that for most of the time for me, when there's specific focus areas to be looked at, it's useful to have the spread be set out in a way where you know everything is going to be covered. And in terms of the types of questions and the types of language that I use, I would say that yes or no questions are a no-no for me. And if you want to know more about what I feel about using empowering language and giving empowered readings where you really give the spread positions the maximum opportunity to help yourself or to help your querent, then you might be interested in my course with Tarot Summer School, Ethany's Tarot Summer School. I will leave it down below. It's all about using empowering language for your readings and making sure that you're creating that active, engaged energy and you're ready to do something with the advice from the cards, rather than finding that the cards are making a querent feel very passive and not really knowing what to do. So it's all about making a reading empowering, and I'm really proud of that course and I get a lot of positive feedback from people on that course, so definitely go over and check it out. If you've stuck with me up until this point, then thank you so much for being interested in my thoughts on anything and everything really. I really appreciate the interest that you have in me, and I would love to have any comments from you down below about anything that I said, anything that sparked your interest, anything that you want to argue with me about. And if you try No Pain with Ghostmane and then have Toasty with Posty, definitely let me know, because I will heart react that shit. Okay, much love until next time, darlings. Mwah, blessed be.